What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode. We are talking about the 2022 NFL draft, and we are going division by division, and we are breaking down which teams won the division in the draft and which teams lost the division in the draft. So it's always a fun one, man. I love talking about these prospects and how they play into the future. Is it one of those things they can help immediately? Is this a pick where maybe they don't help until 3-4 years down the road? It's always really interesting to see how that all plays out, and I'm excited to break it down with you today. Okay, so we've talked about the AFC North. We've talked about the AFC East. We are down to the AFC South. Okay, so before we jump to it, man, if you guys can take a second to click like and subscribe, man, help continue to grow this show. We just hit 2,000 subscribers. If you have it, I'd greatly appreciate it, man. Check out my Patreon, even if it's just dropping a few bucks, man. I greatly appreciate all the help and all the love that you guys show me throughout the past 2 years. So let's jump to it, man. The team that I think won this AFC South, to me, it's the Houston Texans, and it's not because they had a bunch of draft capital. I think they got a bunch of value. And it's maybe not so much with their earlier picks, but as the kind of draft went on, I think they got some guys who maybe were slept on a little bit, or who can have some immediate impact and can develop even more as they're down the road. So when we look at, they really went boom or bust with their first pick. And with the third overall pick, they end up getting Derek Stingley Jr., who's a guy who we've seen tape of him shutting down Jamar Chase. We've seen tape of him being absolutely dominant, elite. But we've also seen tape of him maybe not performing up to his expectations. We've seen him have foot injury, Liz Frank injury. It's really going to be interesting, man. This guy's there's probably not much of a middle ground for him. When we talk about Stingley, it's going to be a guy where he's absolutely elite, or he could be a guy who maybe bounces around team to team, is maybe out of the league by the time he's 30. So it's really going to be interesting. With their next first round pick, they get Kenyon Green, who's an interesting one, man. I really like his skill work. I think he's a very skilled offensive lineman, but he lacks a little bit of an edge that you like to see from your offensive lineman, and he's not quite strong enough. He has the frame to play tackle, but I don't think he's strong enough to play tackle. I think he's quick enough, and I think his footwork's good enough. But I think if he played somebody like a Myles Garrett, he's going to get bullied. I mean, most people do, but you know what I mean. So, but I think he brings a little bit of versatility, which is going to help with a team that had a lot of holes. So I think Kenyon Green is going to be a guy who's going to be playing all over the offensive line. You could see him make probably a start in 2 or 3 different spots this year alone. In the second round, they go and get Jalen Petrie, who's a corner I like. He has a lot of the traits of a corner you want to see. So you see immediately, the Texans know it's a passing league. So they go out with 2 of their top 3 picks, and they go out and get corners. They're trying to lock people down. They're trying to set that, build from the outside in, which is an interesting technique on defense. So I like it. Maybe they're kind of going with that old, Seattle Seahawks kind of mantra of, the Legion of Boom, right? So it's going to be interesting, but I really like what Petrie did at Baylor. His tape was actually a lot more consistent than I originally thought it was. So I do like the Petrie pick. In the second round, they also go out and get John Mechie III, who is a very, very good route runner. He's a guy who probably ceiling isn't as high as other guys that were taken around then. So like you look at like a George Pickens that the Steelers drafted. I think his ceiling's higher than Mechie, but I also think Mechie's more pro ready right now. I think he's a guy who's going to be constantly like making those big third down catches. I think he's going to help somebody like a Davis Mills. So I do like that pick. They go and get Christian Harris, who I'm really surprised he was on the board in the third round. I thought he was going to be a mid to late second round pick. So, I love him. Yeah, he's a winner through and through. And he's a guy that can help the Texans quick, fast, and in a hurry. And then the fourth round, they get Damian Pierce, who I could easily see being a guy who, has a season or 2 in the NFL, who's, averaging 20 plus carries a game. He didn't get used a lot at Florida, but he had tremendous production at Florida. I mean, we're talking about, 100 touches a season, but he's breaking tackles like it's his job, and it is his job. But he's doing things that a lot of running backs can't do. Didn't have the impressive 40 time, which is probably why he landed in the fourth round, but I thought this was tremendous value. So I really like what the Texans did with their picks. We jump over to the team that I think they had the second best draft, but you can put an asterisk next to it. And I think it's the Tennessee Titans. The reason they end up getting, Treylon Burks at 18 is because they trade their probably second best player on the team behind Derrick Henry. They trade AJ Brown. So yeah, the draft looks better on paper when you take but as soon as you take into consideration, they traded AJ Brown. It's a tough one. But look at a Treylon Burks, he really is kind of like AJ Brown. Might even be like a little bit bigger, which is kind of crazy. But Treylon Burks is a guy who I think his tape, he's faster than what his 40 time was. It's not like he had a bad 40 time at all, but he's a guy who we don't really see him get caught. He's a Swiss Army knife. He played a lot in the slot, which is really weird for his body type. You would kind of think that he'd be a guy that'd be a classic X receiver. But that's something maybe where we saw the kind of the leaps and bounds that DK Metcalf took getting into the league with his route running. And maybe that's something we see from Treylon Burks. But I think he's going to absolutely eat in this system when it's run a Derek Henry, and you put something over the top, or if they're keen on Derek Henry and you run an end around or a jet sweep with this guy, or if you just throw a quick screen, this guy is hard to bring down. So I like the Treylon Burks pick. They get a guy in the second round, Roger McQuarrie from Auburn. He doesn't have the prototypical length, but the dude is a gamer, man. He just gets how to play it. He would easily be a top 20 pick if he was an upside athlete. He's an average NFL athlete, so I'm not saying he's a bad athlete at all, but he doesn't have that burst or that suddenness that you look from a Derek Stingley Jr. or a Sauce Gardner. But I think what Roger does is a lot of really good things. He was super productive at Auburn, and he's going to be a guy who I think is ready right now. He can help this team that's in win now mode. And the biggest one that I want to kind of talk about is I really love the value of Malik Willis. I think I like Malik Willis more than clearly NFL teams do. But I absolutely love the idea of you have your quarterback right now. You have Ryan Tannehill. So there's no need to, take a guy in the first round. But the fact that they're able to get Malik Willis in the third round, he's good to sit for a year, 2 years, and you'll know exactly what you have. And if you end up missing out on him and he's an absolute bust, you wasted a late third round pick. You can live with it. But I absolutely love this pick, man. I think it was genius. I think he's a great backup for right now because you can throw him in for gadget stuff. We know Tannehill can move, but Malik Willis is a different kind of guy. So the fact that you can throw him in there, or if Tannehill goes down for a series or for a half, I think Willis is a guy who clearly can't read a defense right now. I don't think there's any questions or qualms with me saying that. But he's a guy who I think can do things that not a lot of guys in this world can do. So I love the Malik Willis pick. When we jump to the third team, I think it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I just think they had really bad luck this year. And what I mean by that is this is the first draft in a long time. There hasn't been a clear number one quarterback or a clear number one player. And they have the first pick, they end up getting Trayvon Walker, who has the ability to be really, really good, just hasn't shown it. Georgia didn't use him that way. Now, did Georgia not use him that way because they don't think he's good enough? Or did they not use him that way because that's how their scheme dictates it? And that's what's really going to be interesting about this. So yeah, Trayvon Walker was the first overall pick in the NFL draft. I do love their second first round pick because they go out and get Devin Lloyd. They trade back in. I thought, at 27th pick, Devin Lloyd is tremendous value at that pick. He's a guy, they just lost Miles Jack. I think he's a guy who can clearly plug and play in Miles Jack's spot. There's a lot of things he can do in coverage. There's a lot of things he can do in run support. So I really do like the Devin Lloyd pick. They go out and get their center of the future and Luke Fortner, center from Kentucky. You definitely need that. I mean, that's the anchor of the offensive line. That's the middle guy. So to have, get a young guy to go along with Trevor Lawrence, super important. And they get Chad Moma, the linebacker from Wyoming, who's a real thumper. He's kind of a little bit of an old school linebacker. I love that, just kind of trying to build. He's a good character guy. You've always heard tremendous things about his interviews coming through the draft process. So that's a great one. And they go out and get Snoop Connor to get a little bit more depth that I don't think they really need in that running back room. But they go ahead and get Snoop. Who I thought lost this draft in the AFC South is I think it's the Colts. And I don't think the Colts had a bad draft at all. I just think it's how everything else played out. I think they had the worst draft in the AFC South. But again, I'm not saying they had a bad draft. They go out and they have a late second round pick and they get Alec Pierce, the wide receiver from Cincinnati. We saw him do some tremendous things when he was playing with Desmond Ridder out there. He's a tough guy to cover. He can do a lot of things. I saw, I think on the draft, they talked about Jordy Nelson. Which I think is an interesting one I never really thought of. I don't know if how much I see it. I'd have to kind of go back in the film and kind of watch it again to kind of see how much of that comparison I agree with. But I think he's a guy who will play a nice complementary role to Michael Pittman. I think Pittman's just kind of in his infancy. I don't think we've seen the best of Michael Pittman yet. But he really did need somebody to go opposite of him, because I think if he takes this leap this coming year, like I think he will, he's going to start drawing consistent double teams. So you need somebody to take some of that pressure off of him. And I think Pierce can do that. They go in the third round and they get Jelini Woods, the specimen tight end from Virginia. This guy could do a lot of things. He kind of actually reminds me of Mo Alley Cox. So it's kind of interesting what they go for in those tight ends. He can kind of help in the running game. He's a big, strong guy. And they know that offense is just get Jonathan Taylor the ball as many times as possible. They go out and get a tackle in Bernard Rainman from Central Michigan. And he was a guy who we saw, in the early process, he was a fringe first round guy. I thought for sure he'd be a second round guy. So the fact they're able to get him in mid third round, I thought is tremendous value for the Indianapolis Colts. And they go out also in the third round and they get Nick Cross, who is one of the better safeties in this draft. Not a super strong class as far as safeties go, but I think Nick Cross is a guy who can make some plays for this team on special teams, but I also think he can drop down, play some slot. We see more and more teams play 3 safety sets, and I think that's where Cross is going to fit in this coming year. So, like I said, the Colts had the worst draft in the AFC South, in my opinion, but I don't think they had a bad draft at all. I thought the Texans had a lot of firepower, but I thought they did really well in the firepower. We've seen teams have, high draft capital before and kind of swing and miss where you're kind of like, what are they doing? But I don't think the Texans did that. I think the Jaguars kind of caught a little bit of bad luck, and I think the Titans made some moves to help now and into the future. So it's going to be really, really interesting. I can't wait for this football season, man. I love the NFL draft, but I cannot wait for the season to start up. If you guys like the episode, you guys like my breakdown, please support the show. Click like and subscribe, help me grow. Check out my Patreon, drop a few bucks, and I appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time.